Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Baby Plato podcast. I'm your host, Josh, and joining me again is Mike.
What's up?
So this week's episode will be about automation, the loss of jobs, and what the future of a jobless society will look like. So what are your thoughts, Mike, on automation?
Well, it's definitely evident that we are moving towards an automated society. I worked at a Chrysler assembly plant, so the factory that builds cars, and right away, just looking at the machinery there, you can see how many basically jobs are required in the plant and how many are reliant on the machines right now. At this point in time, we do have a lot of jobs with humans doing them, but I can only imagine with the efficiency of robotics that those will eventually get replaced too.
And so, do you think we will ever have a society which is completely jobless or where everything is run automatically?
I think the chances of a lot of the jobs that are more labor-based will eventually get replaced by robotics and machines simply due to efficiency. And we've already seen that, like I said, in factories and many other places. It really depends on the type of job because there are some jobs, for example, politics, that, there's so many ethical issues that need, these are more like intellect-based jobs that kind of, we need humans to do those types of jobs. I don't really see, unless, we reach a point where we can design robotics that can make ethical decisions. And if they did, how do we know if it would be for the benefit of humans or from a perspective of a human? So, it kind of depends because there are also entrepreneurial jobs, like making a movie, robots, maybe at one point robotics can have a mind of their own and create movies of their own. Mm-hmm. But who's to say that that's going to run the business out of human directors or writers? Yeah. So jobs like those, I think, will still exist for humans, kind of more artsy types of jobs.
Going back to the movies written by machine, I watched one which was 10 minutes, and they had an automated, I'm not sure what, but it wrote a movie script, and it was really confusing and weird. It made no sense, but that's just the very beginning. We laugh at it now, but then it's what will it be like in the future?
Yeah, it kind of depends how advanced it'll get. Mm-hmm. But for example, a human who grew up in a certain culture will have certain points of view and certain influences that will affect how he creates certain things, for example, creates certain movies or certain types of music. So that's a culture based off of the times that we're living in. And so how do you implement that type of thing into a robotic system? I think the world is going to be more so based around those types of jobs. People will probably end up going into those fields more. But then there's also, I think, going to be a much larger job market for computer science and engineering to build these robots that are supposedly going to outrun the jobs from humans. So I think naturally that's going to be where the job market ends up being.
But the question is, will those jobs, will they be enough for everyone? I highly doubt that those engineers will.
Yeah, it's a very limited. Jobs. Yeah, that's a good point. It's very limited, but that will open up pathways for people to, for example, if you're not going to be an engineer, it'll open up the pathway to do other things, which is probably going to be more on the art side. And in terms of doctors and surgeons, maybe robotics can, take over the physical processes of doing surgeries, but the actual discovery of medicine, the actual discovery of how should you operate. Okay, now we're going to integrate these processes into the machine to do it for us, but we're the ones that has to come up with the processes first. So those types of jobs, again, the intellect-based jobs would be developed by humans, I think. And if we ever do reach a point where we can design robots to do those intellect jobs for us, it's no longer a world of automation. We're living with a whole new species of, to call robotics living, can we actually say that? I don't know, but it's going to be so far past automation once we reach that point that automation isn't even a discussion.
It'll be more like AIs, right? More of a moral question of I think, therefore I am kind of deal, right?
Yeah, like, should we be living with AIs? And to the point where, okay, if we did create robots to do those intellect jobs, like to run societies for us, we're no longer living a human society. We're no longer in control. So to that point, I'm not really sure if we will ever get there, simply because humans probably will always want to be in control and create these robots to assist us, but never to be in control. So it's kind of dependent on the type of job and what's needed. So my guess is mostly the labor-based jobs will be eventually replaced.
Yeah.
Only the very highly intellectual or artsy jobs will be sustained by humans. But maybe I just haven't thought of enough examples to think the contrary. But what do you think?
I know for sure there are robots that can make like music already. I remember I was watching a video and there was a piano and it was made by a robot, but it sounded really good regardless, right? It's like we think of creativity as this sort of nebulous thing, but there are certain patterns which we are drawn to. And that robot kind of took those patterns and then arranged it in a piano sequence. And it was really pretty good, actually.
That's cool.
So the creative jobs, I think we will definitely keep. I don't know if they would even be regarded as jobs, because all the hard labor stuff is the creation of things, right? So once we finish getting automation to the point where we have the creation of goods and services, like when we have food all automated and we have enough for everyone,
right?
Like, will things like music be considered a job?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess what I was thinking more of when I said those things as jobs are people will be able to do those things for a living. And assuming that we live in a society where we still have to make money to live the same way that we do now, I think it'll just give more people the freedom. So you can see it as more freedom to go into these fields.
Yeah.
Or limitations because you can no longer, get a factory job. So now you're forced into these fields because those are the only ones that exist. I think naturally it's almost like starting a business in a sense. Naturally people would go into this entrepreneurial route of like arts or creating a business where they can sell things and make money that way, as opposed to relying on manufacturing goods, like being the worker that physically manufacture the goods versus, only the bosses having the jobs, if that makes sense.
It's kind of like a post-scarcity economy, right? Where we have enough for everyone. Like, would we still need money after everything is, like, at least all the really, like, hard labor jobs are automated, right? Like, would we still kind of need money?
Well, yeah, because humans, like, at that point, we're probably going to, work isn't going to be the same. I think people are going to naturally be living more, I don't know if I want to say luxurious lives, but lives with a lot more free time, depending how the society actually works out, because we don't know how much people are going to even have to work at that time. For example, like, people are still going to need to buy houses to live in.
Yeah.
Maybe the robots are the ones building the houses, but humans still need a system where, the people with more money will buy the bigger houses. But how do you get the more money? It's a very complicated issue. It depends how many jobs would be available.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say how many jobs are available, I mean, we don't know like what types of jobs are going to start to come into existence when a lot of automation starts to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of new jobs that doesn't exist, people are going to get really creative and create these jobs for humans to basically make up for the lack of physical labor types of jobs. It's kind of hard to predict exactly what types of jobs will even exist, because it's easy to say that yes, automation will get rid of a lot of jobs, and then but will that necessarily mean that people are jobless, or will just change into a society where the types of jobs are just different?
Mm-hmm. What do you think would happen when a lot of jobs start becoming automated? Like, how do you think society should or will deal with it?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question, because it's going to be very transitional, very gradual. And I think as it starts to happen, people are going to start seeing problems with it, and then start slowly, as the automation starts occurring, assuming it doesn't happen really quickly, but you never know, it can. But assuming it doesn't, I think society, especially the government, they're going to have to find a way to accommodate a lot of the people that are losing jobs, because if a lot of people are losing jobs and the only people making money are the rich CEOs, the middle class is going to die. I mean, people are already at this point arguing that the middle class is dying already. But to the point where the government has to deal with millions of people with no jobs, where no jobs even exist, they can't allow automation to take over society like that without already having a solution to the people that are going to lose their jobs. So I think it's going to be very transitional, very gradual, and it's something that we're going to figure out as it starts happening. And there are probably going to be a lot of people against it, obviously, because humans are losing their jobs. No one wants that. But as technology grows, I think it will be a natural outcome. But how people will like deal with it, it's hard to say. I would just guess that it'll be figured out as automation gradually gets integrated.
Yeah. I feel sometimes those people who are kind of like really against automation, I kind of feel like they're almost short-sighted, because automation brings prosperity to everybody, right? It might not seem that way because that person lost their job, but I believe that automation of things, of everything, will bring more prosperity to more people.
Yeah. Like going back to the car example, like how many cars were they able to build back in the early 1900s when there weren't any machines and it was all done by humans? It's ridiculously low compared to now. Now there's a new car coming out of the factory every 5 seconds. It's kind of ridiculous. And eventually people are just going to keep thinking of ways of shortening that time even more, so they can, do 10 cars every 5 seconds, that type of thing. And I think as technology grows, people are just going to have to... It's hard to say, because to a certain point, people are just going to have to deal with it. And that's what I mean by there are going to be a lot more, perhaps, different types of jobs that are going to come into existence. I'm not really sure what, but I'm thinking more like jobs that are either arts-based or like media-based, based around the internet, because there's a lot of ways to make money over the internet, which aren't really, physical labor types of jobs. There's a lot of different ways of getting paid, advertising, that kind of thing. So I guess it really just depends how we are able to create jobs to replace the jobs that are going to be lost, and how creative can we get around that to see like how can we make up all the jobs being lost. And I think that will really determine the success of automation.
I think that the jobs that are going to be created won't be as numerous as the ones which are lost. Right? Like, sure, before everyone used to be working on farms, then everyone started working in factories. But now if you look at the new jobs versus the ones that are likely to be automated, there aren't that many. Like, sure, there's programmers and stuff, or social media experts, but those numbers of jobs aren't as close to the number of jobs that you're going to be lost, right?
Right.
And those are just like some examples of fairly new jobs. Like what the future holds, I don't believe those jobs are going to be numerous either, because people are probably going to have to be more specialized.
Yeah, that's
right?
a good point. Like the thousands of factory workers, they all can't be hired to be very specialized engineers or something, or
Yeah.
they all can't open their own business.
Exactly.
So that's a very good point.
And
so then what do you think would happen? Is that not a good enough reason for automation to not happen? Because the government can't just say, "Oh, screw you guys, you're all just going to lose your jobs."
Yeah.
They have to say something and make laws to prevent that from happening.
Mm-hmm. I think the nature of work will change mostly. I know that there is, here in Ontario, there's been a pilot, or they're building on a pilot of basic income, universal basic income. Everyone gets a certain amount of money, like a living wage, but that's it. Like whatever else they make on top, they keep. I think that's what's going to have to happen, is that because automation is, like I said before, going to give us a lot more stuff, and it's going to give us a lot more prosperity, that we have to spread out that prosperity. Like we can't just do anything.
But I don't see the government allowing a lot of people to do nothing and having no jobs. Like I think the government would rather more people work but have less efficiency or prosperity, and it's going to be more the companies themselves pushing for the automation and pushing for the increase of efficiency with these robots. But if it reaches a point where humans no longer have to work,
or at least the vast majority of them don't have to work.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how that would work, because the government is going to be concerned about what people are doing. And unless humans live in a very Fahrenheit 451 type of society where there are just constant distractions everywhere, basically media thrown at your face 24/7, so you have no time to think about anything other than the next TV show or something like that, then the government can say, oh, the population is under control and they are being occupied by a certain thing, because we can no longer rely on jobs being that thing. If they have all this free time, we need them to do something. But now, if we reach that point, we're no longer living in a free society. It's maybe free isn't the right word, but definitely very close to a very heavily consumer, and trying to restrict using the word totalitarianism, but that is a very close comparison, because humans are no longer living for the same reasons that we always have throughout our whole lives, because the living standards are so high where we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But how are you going to contribute to society? And I don't know. It's very complicated. I just think that to some degree the government is very concerned about what the population is doing, and if we're not working, we're probably going to be doing something like Fahrenheit 451, because I don't think the government is going to be very comfortable with humans doing nothing. There's no contribution to society. So unless that happens, I don't think the government is going to allow humans to have the freedom to do nothing, unless somehow we move into this world where the government is like, yeah, utopia for everyone. We want the best for everyone. But that seems very unlikely, because the government always wants to be in control. Like,
I kind of have the opposite view of that. I kind of think that we will have so much more freedom when everything is automated. I don't think the government will care that you're not doing anything for society, right? It's like, sure, you're not doing anything for society, but as long as you're not disruptive or destroying things, like, you'll be fine, right? Like, I don't see why they would care if you're just sitting around doing nothing, or you won't even do anything, because you won't be sitting around doing nothing, because people want to do things. They don't want to sit around and just do nothing, right?
Like, my main point was, like, the government would be okay with everyone doing what they want to do, in the sense of entertainment.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people want to go out on vacations and people want to do these things, travel the world. And if everyone has the freedom to do that, that's great, because that's exactly what I meant by the Fahrenheit 451 type of society.
Mhm.
Because the government is totally okay with everyone basically being just huge consumers, just caring about all this media that they're basically shoving down everyone's throats. But I'm saying, like, because everyone won't be working, that is going to be a very likely way how the government will be able to control the society. And I guess I kind of, without saying it, so I'll just say it more directly now, I'm saying that is more inherently bad.
Okay.
Like, I'm saying that with the assumption that it's automatically a negative, because humans are just living for kind of entertainment. And I guess, I mean, I can't really, criticize people or judge people how they want to live their life, but I do think now in society we're kind of like in this mid range of people wanting to do that. Fahrenheit 451 is just a really heavy extreme, but then there's also like a lot of hard workers who kind of want to like
do something, build something,
do something for the greater good of society. Yeah, kind of thing. Like, they want to invent things and they want to, make an impact on the earth, on society somehow. I'm just thinking of Elon Musk, because of his like SpaceX program and Tesla and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of just thinking, like, yeah, the government won't care, but that's inherently bad. And I think with automation, it'll allow that to happen. And it just kind of depends, like, what people do end up doing. Because if the majority of people all of a sudden, want to become engineers and scientists, I think more job markets will open up to cater to those changes in society. So I don't really know if I was saying it's like a reduction of freedom. I'm just kind of saying it's less good for society to be in a point where we're so free to do anything that we want, because I think a lot of people are going to choose the lifestyle of just pure pleasure, and the government is going to support that. Because, as shown in Fahrenheit 451, it's easier to control a society that does that. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to stop people who want to start their own businesses and create new things and all that, like be an Elon Musk, but I think the majority of people, I'm not really sure how it got into totalitarianism, but
yeah.
But I do think that'll make an impact on how people live and how people's view on life, essentially, and why they're living. Because I can see it easily turning into a society of living just for pleasure, which, again, I've said is inherently more negative, I think.
But why, though? Is it actually more negative? Like, because the thing is, what do people want, right? Like, people don't want to be hurting in any sort of, well, I suppose there are different things, but
this is why I think I keep referring back to Fahrenheit 451 because it's so relevant. Like, that type of society, whatever is sad or is seen as negative, something that makes you have any sort of negative emotion, they destroy from the society. When someone dies, they don't even do a funeral. They just take the dead body, gone, move on with your life. No, don't even think about it. One of the best scenes in that book is when the main character reads a poem, and then someone cries from reading it, and they're like, why would you do that? Why did you make her cry? From a poem. It's not like he hurt her. But the fact that it invoked those negative, I would argue as just sad emotions, not necessarily negative, but they see it as negative emotions. So I do think that this view of pure happiness, pleasure, no sadness is taking away from what it means to be a human.
I don't think that's going to happen, though, because those emotions will always be there. Even in our media right now, we have shows which people get hurt and they cry and they have different emotions. I don't think that's ever going to really happen, that we're going to come to
that
point.
Extreme?
Yeah, like because we all have those emotions, and we have entertainment which is based around that stuff, right? Like you've got horror movies which make people scared, and that is like.
But my argument is, if the mass of society no longer has to work,
yeah,
and they have all this free time, they can do whatever they want. We don't know what people are going to do if they can do whatever they want, like the vast majority of them. But my main argument is we might not reach that extreme on our own, but the government is going to, or maybe not 100% going to, but there's a chance that the government would push for that type of society. And because of that push, we can reach that extreme. And I already think that we're, approaching that, just the idea of everywhere you go, advertisements. There's a TV everywhere you go. Just the idea of like distractions everywhere. Whatever's bad, kind of try not to think about it type of deal. And I do think, who's to say how extreme it'll get? But
I don't know, you're seeing it as a kind of dystopian era, and I see it as like the opposite. I see it kind of like as a utopian era, right? Because I don't think everyone's just gonna sit around and not do anything. I think they're gonna want to do something, right? Sure, there'll be.
But what do you mean by do something? Like
to improve themselves, basically. Because like, why do people have hobbies and stuff, right? They don't always just want to stare at something. They want to do something. They want to create things, right? Maybe not everyone, but I don't think that's inherently bad, right? Like, sure, there's going to be people who don't do anything, but then there's going to be a lot more people than there are now who are able to create like music or art,
right,
and stuff like that. So sure, there's going to be people who don't do anything, but right now, how many people are not doing things because they don't have the time to do it, right? Like, oh, I want to do this thing, like get really good at an instrument, get really good at this thing. I want to improve my body in such a way, but
they don't. Lack of time or something because of their job.
Like maybe their job is really taxing on them and they don't have time to do it, or it's just they have too much work to do and they don't like improve themselves, or they don't do things that they actually want to do because they have to live, or they, So I think that we will have kind of like a golden age once automation of everything happens. Like we'll have a lot more people who are able to do like creative things and to create like basically culture, to be more cultured, right?
Right. Yeah, that seems like a very possible outcome as well. Again, it depends how much the government wants to put their foot in your lives. Maybe I'm just, because I was thinking about Fahrenheit 451, I kind of automatically thought that the government would want a more, like you said, dystopian type of thing.
Yeah.
Or we would consider it dystopian. But yeah, I could see the possibility of that being, like, of your scenario happening, of that being a possibility.
And also, it's like, when there's enough for everyone, would we really need government? Well, I suppose we kind of would, but, like, what would the government really be there for, right? Like, it would probably be there for distribution, I suppose.
For management, because, like, I'm thinking, like,
I think government will change a lot more than it is now, because we have this sort of government which is we see as controlling and stuff like that, but I think government will definitely change a lot. I think a lot of things will change when automation, like fully automation, comes around.
Well,
right, like
it's hard to say.
So I don't think the government will be as it is now. It'll probably change a lot, right?
But I think they're still going to be maintaining the same level of control, though. Like, they will be able to still manage, for example, this basic income. They have to decide, how much money are you getting? Are you getting enough money where every single person can travel 365 days a year, or just enough to live and then maybe kind of, pick up a hobby or something? Like a more of a local kind of smaller type of hobby. So I think in terms of that, like, the government is still going to have, like, the same level of management, I think.
I think their role will change a lot more, right, than what we have now. I think it'll be pretty different because society would have changed so much by then. But
yeah, perhaps
as automation comes around, what do you think should happen? Like, what do you think will happen?
Well, going back to what I was saying before a little bit, I think my view is that the government is going to, no matter what,
have to do something.
But they're going to do something that the government is going to be happy with. Yeah. In terms of like, as long as they're still in control. But, so as long as, people who are losing their jobs have an alternative so they don't start rioting, type of thing. But I'm not really sure how a society can, really function if everyone is able to do whatever they want all the time, unless they're actually given like a basic income and then maybe some sort of responsibility to the society somehow.
Yeah.
Like, is that what you meant by that question, or what are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of kind of what are the steps that would have to be taken. I think basic income is definitely a step that will have to be taken when a lot of jobs are taken. Like last time we talked about self-driving cars, and I believe in the US, the vast majority or the number one industry that employs people is like transport industry. So like freighters and stuff like that, and like big 18-wheeler trucks. Like I believe that hires the most people, at least in the US. So like what happens when all those people lose their jobs? Because they will lose their jobs from this automation, right? Because people are really expensive to employ. That's why. Yeah. That's why.
And once like self-driving cars come to be, it'll be way more efficient to just have them instead of humans.
Yeah, I think basic income is a step we'll have to take, but after that, it's like more extreme versions of that. You think where people start getting things
like people are going to know that they're going to lose their jobs.
Yes,
and if like say they just release this new line of robots, and then they like in a car factory or any factory, and say, okay, we're now able to like fire all these people at once. They're not going to be able to do that right away because the people are going to riot. They're going to get pissed off and say, how can you let all these people get laid off at once?
I think it'll also be a lot more gradual because technology is expensive when it first comes out.
But I was going to say they're going to make it gradual because the government is going to, and these companies would have to find solutions to those problems before they integrate the robots themselves. I'm saying this is once it reaches a point where people are like, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Because in the past it's happened gradually, and but until it reaches a point where society's actually like, hey, there are more people jobless than there are with jobs. Then that's when like the gradual process, people are like, okay, we have to find a solution to make these people happy.
I think it's going to be more gradual just from a practical standpoint, because technology, as it comes out, like people will integrate it, but technology as soon as it comes out is always really expensive.
Yeah.
So it'll slowly, like,
that's true too,
come through, but just from a more practical standpoint. And I suppose eventually, once the technology gets far enough, the government will probably put a little bit of a break on it, right? It's be like, okay, we have to keep a number of jobs before we have a solution for it, right? So
going back to what you said about if people had more time, there's a higher chance of there being more prosperity in terms of like culture and see, I'm not too sure like what the percentage of likelihood that is, because I think humans also are naturally lazy.
Yeah.
And I also think that if people feel like they have all this free time, it's easier to slack off and do nothing.
Yeah.
And if they did do have the time, for example, to work on a specific art or to create a certain thing, they are going to take. I mean, we don't know what the actual outcome is, but I'm guessing people will naturally take a lot more time to do these things. And I'm kind of a believer in like the most, I guess, I don't want to say respectable people, but I think it's a respectable quality within a person for like how hard they work. And I think now when there are jobs, you might not have all the time in your life to do a certain thing, but you're for the people who are able to divide their time in a way where they're working on their art when they are free, because they're not free all the time. Mm-hmm. That time means more. They work harder. And I think that's a more an admirable quality that will be brought out in people because of that limitation. Mm-hmm. And because of the fact that they know that they have a limited time to work hard and get things done.
Mm-hmm. But does that trump all the human suffering that automation will remove, right? Like poverty and like starvation and stuff like that. Like, will that trump those sort of things, right?
I'm not sure if you say trump in the sense of, is that a good enough reason for there to be no automation? I'm saying it. I wouldn't say it's a good enough reason, but what I'm saying is,
it's a possible future.
I'm saying because of that reason, it's not inherently going to be better. It's not automatically going to be better because of that reason that you said with contribution to culture. Because we don't know if, because of all this time, are people actually going to work as hard as the people who nowadays have to do because of the restrictions. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm just being a pessimist, but I do think humans, to some degree, like to a very large degree, is naturally more lazy. And
yeah, I agree.
So my main point is that I think it's more leaning towards the side of humans kind of just like wanting to just distract themselves and like casually doing things that they want.
Yeah.
And not really like doing anything with the same grit that mm-hmm. people are doing now, which I think leads to a richer kind of character within humans, but also society. Mm-hmm. But again, like I said before, we don't know how people will actually react. Like if we did create a society right now, just as like a test subject in this like confined environment where people didn't have to work at all and just live normal, like do whatever they want 24 hours a day, got their basic income and everything, like how would these people actually spend their time?
Yeah. That's the big question, right? Like, yeah. What will people actually do?
And I'm just saying because of the natural laziness, maybe I'm just a pessimist, but that's kind of the inclination that I have.
I believe, though, even if everyone does nothing, I think that's still better than it is now with more people suffering, right? Because you kind of have like, what's happening now is you got a lot of this many people suffering, but then when automation comes, you'll have no one suffering. Or at least for things like poverty and
right.
like starvation, right? They won't be suffering. Uh-huh. And like, I think that's just better overall, right? Like, sure, people will be lazy and they won't be advancing culture. Sure, maybe not as much or as fast, but no one will be like, oh, I'm starving on the streets. I have to beg for food. Oh, right. I don't have clothing. I don't have shelter. I think, sure, there'll be people who will do nothing, right? Like, that's fine, I think, because we would have.
But like for the mass majority of like the whole civilization as a whole, it's going to be better.
Yeah,
that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like it'll be better for everybody, right? Okay. Like we live in a society where we look around, we don't see that much poverty, right? We don't see that much more, mm-hmm. right? Like we won't have wars anymore when we have a post-scarcity society, right? So
well. If a war is going to happen,
it'll be based on like discrimination and stuff like that, right?
Well, it's hard to say because if another society is against automation,
yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying is that like past that, right?
Where like the whole world is automated?
Yeah, where in the whole world everyone has enough to eat and has enough
right.
like shelter and stuff like that. I think like sure I wouldn't mind if a lot of people sat around doing nothing because nobody is suffering in such a way they are now, right? That's why I think this future of fully automation, sure, they'll be sitting around and being distracted through their whole lives, but they aren't going, oh, I've got a gutworm of some sort because I drank water, right?
Yeah.
I think that's better.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think that's a good point. I think that's better too. For that type of basic need. It's just a matter of like how far does it go beyond that?
Yeah.
That makes automation more of a negative versus a positive. But to that point, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
But in terms of wars,
like why are wars fought? I think that's what it comes down to.
Control,
right?
though.
Yeah.
Even if the world is automated, people are still going to want control. And leaders are still going to want to take over.
But would society have changed in such a way that...
Hopefully, man.
Right? Like, that's...
To the point where, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, to the point where life is, like, the standard of living for everyone on the whole planet is good enough where, that type of stuff might not really matter. But I think, based off of history, the power and the greed for control seems to be inherently there.
Of people not just wanting the bare minimum, wanting more than the next person, right?
Yeah, and especially the people who do get into power, into politics. It almost seems like, even now, like, there's always some sort of war of like going on. There's always... I'm not really sure if there's any point in history where there wasn't some sort of war going on. And I think it's just going to be natural. And if we ever do reach a point where there are no wars, it's either because someone won the war and took over the world, or somehow we reached a point where the leaders just became very strong humanists and said, we care about the prosperity of humans more than our control over the world. Which, hey man, if that happens, I'll be like, yes, humans finally persevered. Yeah. But the chances of that seems low. Maybe I'm just a pessimist again.
Yeah. I suppose also, like, how would culture look in that sort of future? Would culture be all homogenous in the future, in like that, right? When everyone kind of stops, because we've got globalization now, where everyone shares everything, and a lot of cultures are blending together. In like a world where we are so connected, and there is so so much that would culture be almost homogenous?
I think culture, because people will have the freedom to maybe like travel. I think there's a high chance that, like you said, we're already kind of like starting to integrate so many different cultures in like specific areas. I think that'll probably just continue to happen more. I can't really see it going the opposite way or staying stagnant. Yeah.
I also think in this sort of future would probably be, what do you think we would be doing other than distracting ourselves? Do you think what kind of ambitions humanity would have? Probably space travel, I think.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if we do see an increase of people going into like sciences, engineering, and arts, because of the lack of jobs due to automation, I do think the job market and society will start to reconstruct itself in a way where that will be a much larger part of society, space travel. And I know right now a lot of people are encouraging that. We're already trying to make that a field where more people should get into. And I don't know if people are going to naturally do that more or less due to automation. Or maybe like it won't change at all. Maybe the same amount of people, because they see it as just like more of a personality trait that determines whether or not someone goes into that field. But I do think, but maybe more so the society, just the way it's constructed. How much do they value these types of things?
Mm-hmm.
I think will determine how many people go into those fields. And it's hard to say whether or not that will be affected by automation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too sure.
Well, I suppose also that kind of goes down to the amount of people that we have, right? Because you know how as society or as a country gets more advanced, they tend to have less children. Do you think that'll be what happens in the future? We'll have a lot less people in general, but they'll be a lot more happy, you think? Or
I don't see the population like decline. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Like that might be too big of a question to ask.
No, but I think a lot of people who don't want kids or are having less kids
doing it for financial reasons, you think?
They're doing it for financial reasons and maybe like personal ambitions that they don't want to let go of.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that automation, maybe because of the free time, they're like, hey, maybe we can have kids.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It could go that way too, because they're like, hey, we have all this free time, where I have the time to fulfill my ambitions and have a child.
Yeah, and have like a full family and stuff like that.
Not have to worry about feeding them.
Yeah, that's also a good point.
So that could also go into that direction.
Or they're just bored and want to bang.
Well,
I just might cut that part.
Debatably, this society is like that right now.
I mean, like, I suppose so, but anyways, I might cut that out. I'll probably cut that out.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point that they'll have like the time and the resources to bring up multiple children.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I do think bringing up wanting kids is a natural instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays we kind of live in this really bizarre society where it's like so hard to live. Well, North American society is what I'm referring to. Where it's becoming more difficult to live, like, and sustain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people kind of get away from the idea of having kids. I mean, I know I am because of that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But in a society where, you know, you don't have to worry about all those types of things, maybe the likelihood of having children is even more.
Yeah, population growth would be higher, maybe. But...
yeah, who knows by that point, because maybe there would be like the rule China had, where you can only have one kid, simply because the Earth can't sustain.
Yeah, yeah,
all those people. But it's hard to say where the society will go by that point, because I think a lot more will change along with automation.
Yeah,
it's not like automation is going to be the only thing that change.
Mm-hmm. Technology in general will advance a lot. So will society and societal values.
And what will people do? Who knows? Maybe the government won't allow people to have all their free time.
Yeah, maybe they'll force them to do something.
Maybe, yeah, they say, like, you have a duty to do these types of things, although they're not really jobs. And you're not doing it for a living, but there's going to be something, you know? I feel like there has to be...
I feel that's kind of something. Like another dystopian kind of future, though, where you're just kind of sat around.
You're, like, forced to do...
Yeah, it's like you have 8 hours of the day to do meaningless work. I feel that's almost worse. Right?
I mean, it might be worse, but it might be what the government wants, because they're like, hey, you guys are jobless, and what do you expect? To just have everything free, you know? They're like, you got to do something for society, and then they would use that as like the propaganda of like, you're doing this for society, you're doing this to contribute, and if you don't, you just want to leech off of other people. Yeah,
and I guess that problem comes down to just amount of people versus jobs available, or that people are
and that kind of just goes back to, like, I don't know what types of jobs are going to come out of existence due to automation. Maybe, you never know, maybe the government will find a way where automation can take all the labor-based jobs, but they have a way of replacing it with other jobs. And then, you know, people will still have to make a living, and basic income won't be a thing, but just the jobs that do exist will just be different.
I feel that basic income will be a necessity, though, or at least some form of something like that, right? Because, like,
it kind of depends. I don't know. Maybe if we reach a point where we can create enough jobs where we still have the effect of no people in poverty anymore, then they're like, hey, there's enough people making money, there are enough jobs, there's no reason to have a basic income.
Yeah, yeah. But I suppose basic income might be something different. It just might be like giving people things rather than money, maybe.
Right, something like that. Yeah, it's a possibility.
Because like right now, I'm not sure there's gonna be enough new jobs for the amount of people there's going to be.
Yeah, it seems unlikely that they will be able to replace every single job. But I mean, who knows what will happen, right? That's what I'm saying. Like the world will have to get kind of creative in that, and maybe there are some jobs that, even though they can be replaced by automation, companies are going to be like, you know what? It's not worth, because if maybe the level of efficiency is like really close to the same of a human, they're going to be like, you know what? We'll just hire a human just because, you know, society's not going to function if we don't.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like a moral sort of
It's going to be more of, exactly. It's more of a moral.
Yeah.
Than, you know, pure efficiency, pure everything.
But I think that machines will always be more efficient than humans. I don't think it'll ever come down to machines being as efficient as humans, because then why would you bother making that sort of machine, right? Why would that become a thing on the market, you know?
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Like, if they feel like humans are doing enough of a good job, maybe they can be content with that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It depends what types of jobs gets created, because maybe we'll end up living in a society where, you know, there are jobs that only humans can do, and then a lot of companies will just use that.
Yeah,
and
but then like
more of those will come into existence.
Yeah, it's like how many of those jobs will actually be though, right? Like,
who knows?
I don't think there'll be that many jobs. I don't think there's gonna be that many jobs.
But then there's gonna be a problem in society where people are like, oh, you know, you guys are the lazy class of people who don't want to work, and then we are the higher class of engineers and CEOs that run these businesses, and we create everything for you. And then there's just gonna be this class of like lazy people who just want to do whatever they want to do.
But it's not even that they might. But it might not even be that they're lazy. It just might be that because there are no jobs, right? That's the problem, though. It's like, you're lazy, but
there's this competition.
There's going to be no jobs.
But there's going to be this competition of, okay, well, you're forced to go to where there are jobs, which are going to be the engineering, science jobs.
Yeah,
or like entertainment.
But those fields are so small, though. That's the problem, right? Those fields are so small. I don't think people are going to be able to get into it. At least not a lot of people, right? Like, sure, you can only have so many entertainers and engineers, you know?
I know. That's true. But
I think people are going to just have to be more compassionate, right? It's like, well, not everyone could get a job because there aren't any.
You know? Right. Maybe, yeah.
I think that's what's going to have to happen, is that, you know, there's just going to be no jobs, so people are going to have to just be like, okay, well.
But there's just going to be this bigger divide.
Yeah.
Obviously, the people who are engineers, everyone's going to be like, oh, they're like the engineers. They're the ones who like created society for us to be this way. They're almost going to be like, even if they're not all going to be assholes, you know, I think there's just going to be a bigger divide naturally. And then all of these people are all of a sudden going to be like in a power of authority, just like the government. So now, you know, how many people will actually care? I don't know, but it's hard to say. I do value, like I said, about the character of a human, like working really hard. And in today's society, there are a lot more people working because they have to. And it creates that kind of character, which wouldn't exist in an automated society.
Yeah,
at least the one that we're thinking of.
Yeah.
And unless we create a society where it's just pure competition based, you know, like everyone tries for the engineering jobs, everyone has to do these things, and the few who are successful, we put them on a pedestal. The few who aren't, you know, they just live normal lives.
Yeah.
But nothing matters because we're all going to die. Now watch our podcast or listen to our podcast on death.
Thanks to Mike for joining me on episode 5 of the Baby Plato podcast. If you have any comments, suggestions, or anything else you want to let me know, feel free to email me at babyplatopodcast@gmail.com or leave a comment wherever you found this.